Hi, I'm Nathan Wesson, and I decided to do my article critique on common sense morality and the ethics of killing in war. In 2015, there had been frequent reports in the media of controversial and illegal conduct employed during military conflicts all over the world, but mistreatment of people in the Middle East was very much in the public eye. Foul tactics used by Americans in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the brutalization of civilians in the Gaza Strip by the invading Israelis in 2008 have generally changed the ways people see war. So the researchers took steps to create data on how people perceive the morality of war in an attempt to understand how the average Israeli views their current events. The questions that scientists asked when constructing this survey was, when considering wartime conflict, will the average person side with the legal rules of engagement or with what they believe is right? Per the Geneva Convention, the legal rules of engagement state that combatants may be intentionally targeted if this is necessary to gain a military advantage, but non-combatants may never be intentionally targeted. They take it a step further in the survey by discussing traditional war theory and revisionist war theory. Traditional war theory involves the symmetry principle, which states that combatants on both sides have the same rights and are equally liable to being attacked merely by posing a threat, but it is also never okay to attack a non-combatant civilian. However, revisionist war theory entails the idea that there is a distinction between civilian and soldier, but that status does not reflect their personal involvement in the war effort and can therefore not rule them out as a threat. All 805 participants were read one of 12 hypothetical scenarios of a war between two countries and asked to imagine that they were the commander of one of the two warring sides. No specifics were given about either country. And to gain a military advantage, they had to order their troops to intentionally attack a crucial hill, and the survey questions were asked based on their action or inaction surrounding this hypothetical assault. There were two variables that were manipulated in this case, and the first being the cause of war, which places the taker in one of three positions: the aggressor state, the defender state, or the border dispute state. The aggressor state is the stronger side in the conflict, the initiator of the war, and they have the aim of taking over Country B's gas deposits. The defender state, however, they were read the same, except they were playing the role of the defending side. The border dispute group, however, is made up of neither Group A nor B's people, but a third party who has been enlisted to fight on State A's behalf. Participants were told that in order to conquer a strategically important hill, they had to target the individuals on it. Each participant had one, but the people were broken up into four categories: combatant soldiers who were stationed at a military base, non-combatant soldiers who supplied food to the fighting troops, involved citizens whose factories functioned to make food for the troops, and the uninvolved citizens who had no involvement in the war effort whatsoever. And in every scenario, it was emphasized that the winning side would establish sovereignty over the contested territory, but would not commit mass killings of the soldiers or citizens of the enemy. And I thought that was strange that had to be clarified. The next steps involved asking the participants which country was justified in their actions and whether or not the commander's decision to attack and take the hill would affect the outcome of the war. And this question was based on a 1 to 5 scale. They also asked the participants whether or not they would fire on the group and whether or not they thought the attacks would be morally permissible. Then they were asked to speculate on whether they believed their fellow countrymen, in this case Israelis, would fire and whether they would have feelings of guilty afterwards. All of these were based on a binary scale, and lastly, they were asked 3 questions regarding the 3 other target subgroups and whether they would fire or not. For example, the groups that fired on combat soldiers were asked if they would fire on uninvolved citizens. The first table illustrated that there wasn't much differentiation between the different personal traits and their perceived importance of the attack, but The second table indicated that the justification of the attack was strongly influenced by the cause of the war. Almost 35% of the people decided that State B was the most just cause, and this figure was only seconded by the 31.7% of people who decided that neither side was just in this case. But strangely, little over half the aggressor state recognized State B as the just side, and 1/3 of the border group found the aggressor state to be the just side. The researchers noted in Table 3 that those who fought a war of aggression were more likely to find the attack impermissible and were more likely to feel guilty following the attack. And these findings are contrary to popular belief and the researchers' expectations, but they chalked it up to a tendency of the participants to view their own side as the right side. And this points to a much bigger problem of warring nations not being able to admit when they're being unjust and fighting for unjust causes. Table 4 concluded that the attitude towards an attack was much more permissive in the case of a defensive war, meaning that the percentage of participants who decided against the attack was significantly lower in those who fought a defensive war compared to those who fought a war of aggression. So people on the defensive side were more likely to attack the hill regardless of the target on it. Table 5.1 illustrates the decision against the attack from each state based on the categorization of the target. And 5.2 illustrates the rates of the expected decision among most other Israelis. And I don't feel like that is a very fair question to ask, and I feel like it skews the data just a tiny bit. The percentage of participants who considered the attack as morally impermissible was highest when it involved uninvolved civilians, followed by involved civilians, non-combat soldiers, and then combat soldiers. In conclusion, the attitude towards the attacks were much more negative when they were part of an aggressive war rather than when they were part of a defensive war. Objective towards the attack was much more prevalent when the targets involved were civilians rather than soldiers. Participants' judgments, decisions, and feelings of guilt were strongly affected by the cause of the war and the categorization of the targets. And these findings point to a sense of an active moral compass in your average Israeli, where killing in war is concerned. While I appreciate and idealize the traditional war theory, I know that the revisionist war theory has a much more realistic approach. There are a great many factors to consider when deciding whether to fire or not, and a uniform and a flag is only one of them. Not every army fights in armor and camo. Some fight in fursuits and jeans. And on that track, every soldier is trained to shoot, but not every soldier is trained to fight. And murdering somebody who can't fight back or is unable to is reprehensible in any scenario. However, using the revisionist war theory, it could be argued that anyone in even relative proximity to a problem could be guilty by association. Using that information, you can justify just about anything, from firebombing a jungle to ordering a drone strike on an orphanage. And that is a very terrifying thought for me. I thank you for reading my article critique.